Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, the Royal College of Nursing have confirmed that its members have rejected their 5% pay offer, of course, including additionally as well a bonus. What do you make to that? It basically means strikes will happen again. Is that the right decision? Are they simply holding out for their worth, or are they being greedy? Your thoughts on that? And in this country, 5 million of us apparently have diabetes, 90% thereabouts of which is type 2, which many blame on lifestyle. Some people are saying the government needs to step in and do more. Do they? Or do we have to take responsibility more for ourselves and gambling? Let's cut to the chase, shall we? Is it time that we just basically outlaw all advertising of gambling because some people can't control themselves? Your thoughts? And take a listen to this.
Something to say about May's local elections? T-Dog's spitting bars about voter ID selection. So make sure you bring it or you'll receive rejection. Rejection.
Listening and not watching, you should celebrate because your eyes just swerved something that is quite frankly embarrassing. I'll be showing that full clip a little bit later on in the programme, but basically it's quite an oldish guy rapping his way through, encouraging us to get some ID to remember to vote in May's general elections. Voter ID. Are you in favour of it or not? Your thoughts on all of that? And tonight we'll be keeping me company, Ben Habib, and the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson. I'm looking forward to that. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with a legend that is Polly Middlehair.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story tonight on GB News, well, as Michelle was bringing you up to date there, you heard nurses will stage another round of strikes after rejecting a pay offer from the government. The Royal College of Nursing members voted to reject the offer of a 5% pay rise this year, as well as a cash payment for last year. The action, running from 8 p.m. on the evening of the 30th of April, will last for 48 hours. And for the first time, it'll involve nurses working in emergency departments, intensive care and cancer care. It follows an earlier announcement by Unison that its NHS members had overwhelmingly accepted the same offer. Paediatric nurse Olivia Princewell told GB News she thinks the government could have made a better offer.
Junior doctors work for incredibly long hours. So do nurses in conditions that are absolutely ridiculous. To them come to work and be happy with the job. Okay, that's not even safe for the patient. So what we're trying to do here, and I believe that's what everyone is trying to achieve, is come to a situation where there is a sort of agreement between us nurses, the junior doctors, and also the government to feel like when you're going to work, you're safe.
A mother and a father have been found guilty of murdering their baby son on Christmas Day. Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden inflicted repeated acts of severe violence on their 10-month-old baby boy, Finley. 71 bruises and 57 fractures were found on his body. Finley had only been placed back in their care for 39 days before he was killed, despite social workers asking for a longer transition period. A child safeguarding review has now been launched. Detective Inspector Paul Bullock said the injuries inflicted on Finley were the worst he'd seen.
As a parent, you have no greater responsibility than to a child who is in your care. But Bowden and Marsden could not even bring themselves to take poor Finley to hospital when it was totally clear that he was critically ill. They've never given a reasonable explanation as to why they did not do this, but it appears abundantly clear that their primary concern was their own freedom, not the life of Finley.
2 serving Met Police officers have been dismissed over discriminatory messages they sent to colleagues in a WhatsApp group, including some about Katie Price's disabled son, Harvey. A gross misconduct hearing also found another 6 former officers would have been dismissed without notice if they'd still been serving. Speaking on behalf of the Force, Commander John Saville apologised to the Price family, saying he'd been repulsed and ashamed. Now, within the last hour, French lawmakers have voted in favour of raising the pension age from 62 to 64. People are gathering in front of Paris City Hall right now to protest the government's decision. President Macron's pension reform triggered weeks of protests right across the country, and the new legislation, which was given the go-ahead by France's Constitutional Council today, will be implemented from the 1st of September. Here, a student who threw eggs at the King has been found guilty of threatening behaviour. 23-year-old Patrick Thelwell threw at least 5 eggs at the monarch during a visit to York Minster in November last year. He pleaded not guilty, arguing that he acted in self-defence against what he called the violence carried out by the British state. The judge sentenced Thelwell to a 12-month community order with 100 hours of unpaid work to do. Meanwhile, the King has been speaking of his pride that he has in his 2 sons as he observed military cadets at Sandhurst Royal Military Academy this afternoon. It was the monarch's first visit to the parade as King. During a speech, he said he stood as a father of 2 alumni of the academy, mentioning the immense pride the princes would be feeling. The King also praised the UK's role as a leading nation in delivering training, equipment and advice to Ukraine. Now, a European rocket is on its way to Jupiter, 4.1 billion miles away, to explore whether or not it supports life. It's going to take more than 8 years for the 6-ton spacecraft called JUICE to get there. It's then going to spend around 3 years using instruments to investigate whether the planet's 3 moons can support life in its oceans in a £14 billion mission. If all goes well, JUICE should reach Jupiter by July 2031. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight on this Friday night. I mentioned Friday because some of you might be desperate to get out and go to the pub, but worry not. Because if you're sitting there looking at the time going, oh, beer or Michelle, you can do both. You can take me with you on your radio if you haven't tried it yet. DAB Plus we're on. Just simply search for GB News. You don't have to miss a thing. Keeping me company right through till 7 o'clock, whether that's in your house, your pub, or I dread to think where. Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a member of the Reform Party, and a new face. We like those, don't we? Tom Watson, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party. You're very welcome tonight.
It's lovely to be here, Michelle.
Good. Let's see if he still says that at the end of the programme. I'll ask him that exact question. I want you to get in touch with me tonight. As per usual, what's on your mind? gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email. Or Twitter, GB News, or at Michelle Dewbs. Now, before I get into some of the top stories today, I do have to talk to you for just a second, if you will indulge me, because yet again, we have received details of another child that has been murdered by his parents. I mean, I have to say, this channel is, 2 years old? I've lost count now of how many of these I've had to do. The child in question now is 10-month-old little boy. Finley Burden is his name. He was murdered by his parents on Christmas Day in lockdown 2020, just 39 days after social services returned him to the very parents that killed him. And when I say killed him, to be absolutely clear, 71 bruises, 57 fractures, multiple burns, including burns that were delivered by a cigarette lighter. You guessed it. Social services were involved with this family. A few weeks ago, you may remember Lola James, aged 2, had 101 injuries that were akin, and I quote, to a high-speed car crash. You guessed it, social services again involved. You may remember Star Hobson, the little 1-year-old, again murdered by those people supposed to love and protect her. You guessed it, social services involved. Philipinjo Hughes, aged 6, you'll recall that one. Again, murdered by those supposed to love and protect him, and again, social services. Logan Mwangi, aged 5, again, do you see the pattern here? Murdered by those supposed to love and protect him, and you guessed it, again, social services were involved. Now, I am sick and tired, and I say this as a mum, and perhaps I will reflect many decent viewers out there watching and listening. I am sickened, appalled, and deeply saddened by these cases, and I am appalled by the failings of social services and those services that are failing these children. It is not enough to sit there and say, lessons will be learned, and we will look on this and make changes. It is not enough. How many more children will be murdered before real changes are put in place? What would those changes be? We need real national conversation about this now. I would argue that actually, if these people, these workers that are supposed to protect children, do not, and those children are murdered, why not look at criminal prosecutions for those people that have failed those children? As for the murderers themselves, I don't even want to call them parents because they're not. They sicken me. They're not good enough to have that name. I would actually look at sterilising them, making sure they can never, ever create children again. What do you think? What is the answer? How on earth do we stop this? How on earth do I manage to sit here and never again have to mention another child that has been killed? Your thoughts? Ben Habib.
Well, I completely agree with your sentiment. I mean, this is a heinous crime against a vulnerable individual, a baby, that can't begin to defend itself. It's absolutely shocking. I think we've got to be careful, though, to make policy on the hoof, if you like, and without wishing to diminish the disgusting nature of what happened. You know, social services here, I think, were let down by the judiciary, because social services were quite early onto these parents. In fact, even before the baby was born, they recognised these parents pose a threat to the baby. And they confiscated the baby, I think, 3 days after it was born. But it was a judicial review in October 2020 that brought the baby back to the parents. And, as you say, 39 days later, you know, the baby was killed in a really most gruesome way. And the fault, I suppose, of social services, to the extent that they were at fault, was in that 39-day period when they didn't keep an eye on what the parents were up to. And you might also draw some inference about lockdowns here. You know, I don't know whether lockdowns had a part to play in social services not fulfilling their function, fulfilling its function. But the one thing I would like to say, you know, we've got to be quite careful on attributing liability, because if you do make it potentially a criminal offence for social services not doing their job properly, you might find that you have an evaporation of people who want to be part of social services, and you almost create a bigger problem.
Or you might find that you get people that are actually terrified of the consequences and therefore do their job properly. Tom Watson, what do you make to it all?
Well, I mean, there are very few things that make me so angry that I almost want to hit someone. But obviously these terrible cases are the worst ever. At the heart of this is parental evil. And there are just some evil people in the world. But Ben is right. For every failing in a social service setting, there are many thousands of cases that are dealt with appropriately. All these cases are unique, but at the heart of it is evil from the parents that commit these crimes. That mums and dads, we can't possibly understand how these people can behave like that, because we love our children. We can't imagine that kind of cruelty. Now, there are lessons that will have to be learned from this. I know you'll be angry about it, Michelle, because we've seen so many of them. One of the lessons might be that we don't resource social work enough. And what worries me about the reaction we have to some of these cases is, are we driving people away from social work, professionals that could actually do the job? I would never want to be a social worker. I mean, the pressure they're under, the resources they're under, and I'm sure there's a lockdown context. It's not an excuse, but it will be something that has to be considered.
And I think we need to look at the legal system too. You know, what happened in that hearing in October that enabled the judge to make that
Yeah, well, let me know your thoughts at home. And I'm not creating policy on the hoof, by the way. I've seen way too many of these children. You'll all remember the baby Peach. Remember that case? That was an awful one. This has been going on for years and years. And just before I move on to another topic, let me just be clear. This little boy, this little 10-month-old Finley that I refer to, he was last seen alive by care professionals on the 27th of November when a social worker found him lying alone on a sofa in a living room while his mum and dad was upstairs listening to music. Who leaves a 10-month-old on their own on a sofa? If you've already got alarm bells about these parents, you should have had that kid out of there. After that, the last visit to the family was on the 23rd of December when the dad said the child couldn't be seen as he was asleep upstairs. The mum was seen down the road carrying out, and this is the direct quote, what looked like a drug deal. I mean, the absolute state of that. I think that some of those social workers need to hang their heads in shame. Anyway, I'll leave it with you. And your thoughts, tell me what you make of all of that. GBViews at gbnews.uk is how you reach me tonight. And you may have just been hearing the nurses are planning to go on strike again. This is, of course, after the nursing biggest union, the RCN, voted against the government's pay deal. Just to recap, actually, it was 54% of them, actually, that voted against this. And they were offered, I think it was a 5% pay increase plus a bonus that worked out at about 6% there or thereabouts, depending on the wage. Tom, do you think it was the right... are you in the side, I guess, of the workers here or the government?
I'm in the side of good public services, and there's a negotiation over pay. People work in a labour market, whether we like it or not. This is the worst possible outcome for government, for nurses and for patients. It shows that the union have lost their membership, and it's a failure of leadership. I cannot help but think, had the government done this deal a month before they actually got it over the line, the leadership of the nurses' union could have persuaded enough people to vote in favour of this deal. What we've got now is an impossible situation. The leadership of the RCN can't get their workers back off their strike baton. The morale is so low, and unless something else is offered to them, we could see the worst of all worlds, which is nurses giving up and leaving the sector. And if you think about the NHS, you have to now think we're in a global market. If you're a nurse in Australia, you earn 3 times as much as a UK nurse. Same in the Middle East, 4 times as much. And I know of hundreds of nurses that have left the country to go and work abroad because it's the only way they think they can give their families a decent start.
What are the pensions like over there? Do we know? Are they similar to what you get here in the UK?
I don't know what the pensions are like, Michelle, but I think I can be very certain that you get a lot more money as a nurse in Australia and the Middle East. That's undeniable.
And Canada and the US.
Yeah.
I mean, most developed nations, actually, they get paid more.
And that's a problem. And it's a problem for Rishi Sunak because he came in, he's promising a world-class health service. It may end up costing us more to try and replace the nurses that leave the sector. And so there is a balance here, and there's always an opportunity to find a later deal.
One of his 5 pledges, Tom, isn't it, to get waiting lists down? So this isn't a very good start. We're in April, and actually the National Health Service is still in turmoil.
Yeah.
We just had the junior doctor strike. It's going to rumble on and on.
I just want to point out as well that 75% of union members actually voted to accept the deal. So I'm talking about RCN, which of course is the biggest one. So what do you think they should get offered then, Ben?
Well, I've said on this programme before, I think this is a failure in governance at the highest level. These strikes were well flagged back in June last year. People knew the public sector was in turmoil. Teachers were going to go on strike. The RMT was first out of the gates, if you like. The health service, judges, the judiciary, they were all on strike. Everyone was out for higher pay. And the Royal College of Nurses, to be fair to them, as Tom mentioned, are paid, globally much less than their counterparts. And the Royal College of Nurses has never striked before. This is their first strike in history. So I've got sympathy with the RCN. They started, I think, slightly amateurishly, demanding a 19% wage rise, and they were never going to get that. But then they settled for something that was equally shocking the other end of the spectrum. Having asked for 19%, with real wage reductions of 30% over the last 13 years, to settle on a 5% increase, which is lower than many other unions have settled at, was, I think, a failure in negotiations by Pat Cullen. And as Tom now says, you've got this real mess where Rishi Sunak's on his back foot, the government won't know how to handle it, Pat Cullen is going to have to take a very strong stance, and you're going to have intransigence from both sides. So the problem is going to rumble on, and we have a broken labour market.
But you say it's going to rumble on, but actually the next strike that they're going to do, that has to be their last one for a while, because they're only allowed to do 6 in the 6 months post the original ballot. So it'll be interesting then to see what they're going to do next.
It's much harder, though, Michelle. Remember, this isn't a militant trade union. This isn't Arthur Scargill. This is what you'd call a very moderate union, and they've lost their members. This is grassroots up, and it's very hard to politically lead people out of that when they've just had a majority ballot. If I was the health secretary, I'd be looking at what else can I get? What else can I give these union leaders so that they can go and sell a deal to their members? Otherwise, we could be here for months and months and months.
But you say, they can't sell it to their members, but I'll repeat my figures.
They were close.
Yeah, the RCN, it was only 54% that rejected it, and the turnout was only 61%.
But in the trade union world, when your leadership ask you to vote for a deal, and then the members on the ground, these are not people active in unions, these are just members who get a ballot paper, they say, no, we're not having it. We've had enough. And that's because they've been alienated, because the government didn't get them round the table early enough. And it's hard to get out of that. And when you look at these guys, they've had, as Ben said, they've had below inflation pay rises for a decade, and they're just struggling. And then you get inflation quintupling in a year. It's pushed them over the edge. And so this is very different to what we know as industrial strife, that kind of, idea of militant trade unionism. This is ordinary people desperate for a better living, and the government should recognise that and get everyone back around the table and try and see if there's something else they can do to resolve it.
I would be interested in the morale in the workforce, because you say that they're ordinary people. As I speak about often, my mum and sister, for example, are NHS nurses. And what I will find interesting is the dynamic now, because you're going to have nurses alongside each other. So you'll have your unison worker who's accepted this deal alongside...
all of them.
Alongside a worker now that potentially is going to get a lot more, alongside other nurses like my sister, their ballot didn't meet the threshold, so they couldn't even take part in the action.
It's all destabilising.
Yeah, so you're going to have this massively demotivated workforce, and I wonder how that will pan out in terms of morale and motivation on the ward.
We know it pans out. They leave the sector, and then you have to train more nurses, which costs more money, or you bring in people from abroad, which obviously the government aren't that keen on these days.
And that ain't so easy when they look at what they have to face when they come here. I think Rishi Sunak has got a real problem. He paints himself as this guy who can analyse stuff to death and then pick problems off and resolve them. Well, actually, that's blown a hole right below the waterline for him.
What do you make to it? You guys at home, do you support the nurses? Do you think, yes, you're still backing them? Or do you think, come on now, let's get into work, let's try and move forward? What about the division, as I've just been mentioning, by the separate unions accepting or potentially still not accepting going forward different deals? Same colleagues, potentially on different wages. Your thoughts on all of that? I want to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your feedback, but I also want to move on. I want to talk about the diabetes crisis in this country. Get this. Over 5 million of us have diabetes. Lots of it is type 2, which many blame on lifestyle. Some are saying the government needs to step up and do more. But don't we need to step up and do more to look after ourselves? Your thoughts? See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a member of the Reform Party, and Tom Watson, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party. Welcome back, everybody. Philip says, how nice to see Tom Watson on the show, Michelle. Please, can you say welcome back, Tom? We've missed you. Is Philip your dad?
No, but he can be if he wants to be. That's very... Thanks, Philip.
If you want
Thank you.
to be, there you go. I bet you've never had that offer ever before.
It's not Phil Davis, is it? My old parliamentary sparring partner.
Oh, I don't know. Is it? Do you know him, Philip? Do you know him? Has he paid you to send a nice email in? I don't know. Tell me. Lots of you getting in touch about that child murder story at the top. Chris says, we can't blame social services. If you make social services legally responsible, Michelle, as you want to do, no one would go into that profession. These guys cannot do right for doing wrong. Gavin says there's several good reasons for the return of the death penalty. Murdering your own child is one of them. I've got to say, Gavin, I actually think that's too good for them. I think if they are someone who burns their own child, who abuses them, breaks pretty much every bone in their body and all the rest of it, I just think actually giving them a simple injection is a little bit letting them get off scot-free, if you ask me. Gary says, I do agree that social services should face some type of prosecution, perhaps, Michelle, as you say. It would finally protect vulnerable children. Keep your thoughts coming in. Graham says it's ridiculous that one union accepts a pay deal, another rejects it. The strikes are becoming tedious and dangerous. Wayne says, is it not time to bring nurses in from abroad and sack the ones who want to be on strike? Because obviously they have no respect for the people's well-being, says Wayne. Julie says, until my son became a Julia doctor, I would never have believed it was legal to be expected to work the hours they do for so little reward. We never get to see him because of his workload. No wonder they're leaving in their droves, says Julie. And the government stance will do nothing but lower their morale even further. Keep your thoughts coming in all the usual ways, but let's move on for now. The UK is in the midst of a diabetes crisis. This is according to a new report. Apparently, 5 million of us have diabetes, 90% of which is type 2, which is a condition more likely to be developed if people are overweight. This has led to lots of people shouting that the government needs to do more, save us essentially from ourselves. Tom Watson, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. You are somebody who did have type 2 diabetes. This is often cited as a lifestyle, side effect of bad lifestyle choices, if I may be so blunt. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, definitely. And mine's an everyman story, really. I was a normal, working class bloke. I liked my beer and curries. I piled the weight on over 25, 30 years. I became overweight, obese, pre-diabetic, hypertensive, then diabetic. And I thought I was going to die, and I had to do something about it. And I did do something about it. And 5 years ago, I put type 2 diabetes, I say I put it into remission, because I know that if I started eating sugary products again, or drinking too many beers, or, not looking after myself, the diabetes would return. So
Right.
you never lose it, but you can control it through lifestyle changes.
But then you said you thought he was going to die. At what point you say that you was, first of all, overweight, then you became bigger a bit. At what point did you sit there and go, actually, I've got to do something about this?
Well, I think a lot of blokes, you just end up in denial. Right? You lie to yourself. And so for me, it took my children, really. I didn't want to die for my children. I love them very much. I'm quite an old dad. And I just reached a point where I thought, if I don't address this now, I'm not going to be able to do it. And of course, being a former MP, or being an MP at the time, I used to sort of read the reports on diabetes. And I remember one of the statistics, I remembered reading that the NHS amputates 150 feet or toes a week as a result of type 2 diabetes. And probably half of those people could remove themselves from the condition with lifestyle changes. It's that serious. And it's that serious the NHS won't be able to cope, because the graph is going that way. And unless we make significant changes, it's not going to be 5 million in 10 years' time, it's going to be 7.5 million. And there are not enough doctors in the NHS to treat people with these chronic conditions.
My best friend, I don't know if she won't mind if she's watching, but her dad is one of those people. He's lost his foot and now his leg up to the knee because exactly of the conditions that you describe. By the way, I do want to just say pause and respect to you, because you actually lost the equivalent of me in weight. You did, 8 stone.
I've put a little bit more back on, but I'm back in the gym. But
that is literally like you piggybacking me around for life. That is the equivalent of what you lost.
Yeah.
Like, well done. I respect that achievement. I really do. Ben Habib, many people are saying the government needs to step in. Do they really?
Yeah, and that's my issue. Every time we have a problem or a crisis, nothing is ever just a problem nowadays, everything's a crisis. So this is 5 million is a lot of people. But it's not a government issue, it's a personal responsibility issue. And I think Tom's journey is really instructive. It was Tom coming to terms with what Tom had to do to save Tom. And you can't have government micromanaging what we eat. I know Boris Johnson had this idea of, 2 years ago, to have an app that actually monitored how many greens we eat each day. And for supermarkets to be guiding us towards more healthy food. But how invasive are we going to be in people's lives? Ultimately, I think the state has far too much influence over our lives already. We see that both through regulation and the tax system. If they're going to start telling us now what to eat and how to live our lives, I think that's a step too far. Absolutely, it has to be done through the education system. Teachers need to be telling children what's good for them, and that sense of personal well-being needs to be inculcated. But that's not government's job. That is parental job. And I'd say some of the parents that you were accusing of being bad parents, I mean, bad parents.
I'm not accusing them of it. I'm pointing out that they are.
Absolutely. Bad doesn't even begin to describe. But there is bad parenting in parents who don't explain to their children that they've got to exercise, that they've got to eat healthily. That is bad parenting. And it starts at home, should continue at school, and if you've got to take personal responsibility.
But I would personally bring back what they used to call like home economics, because I think that so many people these days, they don't know how to cook. Blinda says the food companies are possibly quite as guilty as those people who are obese. I think what she's saying there is too much hidden this and that and the other. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is fair. And I mean, Ben's right to a degree. The individual has to decide that they're going to get fit and they're going to deal with it, and it's hard. You have to really change. You have to change your habits that sometimes are lifelong. But I always describe it as the system stacked against you. The 2-for-1 offers in supermarkets, it's always the sugary stuff. The labels are impossible to understand what you're putting in yourself. It's only recently that if you're in some of the big restaurants, you know what the calorie intake is.
Oh, Tom, come on. You know that if you sit there and you're eating, I don't know, chips, kebabs, ice cream, you don't need an easy-to-understand label to make you realise, actually, if I eat loads of those, I'm literally just going to become fat.
Well, it wasn't until I read the Daily Mail. You go to Costa Coffee, you can get, all right, it's a creamy coffee, right, with a thingy in that can have more than 2,000 calories in. Until I saw that on a label, I didn't know. I never had that coffee, by the way, but some people do. And so it is absolutely true that people don't know what they put in the value of what they put in themselves. And that's why I think it's a partnership between the state and the individual. Public health is really important. We're closing our swimming pools because the swimming pools haven't got because of the energy prices. We're saying to people, go out and be healthy. How can they do it?
And removing the tools.
Buying fresh fruit and veg is now more expensive than buying cheap ultra-processed food that people on low incomes have to buy to pay the family bill. So it's a partnership. It's not just one or the other. Ultimately, it's down to individual choice, but you can help people on that journey. And it's in the country's interest to do that. Because, as I said, the NHS is going to collapse through diabetes alone. We spend 10% of the NHS budget on diabetes.
10%, that is a huge amount, isn't it? I need to be blunt, it does actually start with you. And I think until you make that decision, admirable one that Tom himself took, until you make that decision, doesn't matter what anyone else or anything else is going on, it has to start with you. Could you make that decision for yourself, for your kids? I don't know, you tell me. All the usual ways. Quick break. When I come back, more of your thoughts, but also I want to talk gambling. The Premier League have decided to stop gambling sponsorship on front of matchday shares. Good idea? Does it go far enough or nowhere near? Your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a member of the Reform Party, keeps me company, as does Tom Watson, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party. Welcome back, everybody. Lots of divided opinion, I have to say, on the nurses' strike. Some of you absolutely backing them, saying that they need to be valued much more. Other people... You've been quite rude, actually. I won't mince my words. You've been quite rude. You think that they really should just get back to work, certainly dividing you. The diabetes one, again, you know, I would say that you're almost divided on that one. Many people saying it is the food industry's fault, other people saying that actually it's a lack of motivation for oneself. Joan in Devon says, I've been a type 1 diabetic for 60 years. You're saying that you do believe that it was because you didn't look after yourself and you've been frightened by a diagnosis and some of the things that you've learned along the way. Lots of you actually getting in touch about your diabetes experiences. Also, as well, Jane, about that top topic where I was talking about the children being murdered. She's saying that she's a lecturer in youth studies and some other things. It's a very long email, so I'll paraphrase it, but what she's basically saying is she doesn't feel it's the social workers at fault. She feels it's the caseloads. They just simply have too many families to look after. What she's saying is the entire system needs an overhaul. Let's move on. The Premier League is basically saying that they're going to withdraw gambling sponsorship from the front of their match day shirts by the end of the 25-26 season. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Ben Habib, when it comes to gambling, do you just think we should just say, right, no advertising of gambling companies at all, or not?
No, I don't think that. You know, as you probably know, Michelle, you know, I'm a believer in libertarianism, and I'm a believer that people need to make their own decisions and take personal responsibility for the decisions they make. And, you know, this continual sort of ingress of a nanny state, almost wet nurse, as I've described it before, state into our lives has to stop. This is a slightly different issue because this is Premier League, which is a private entity, deciding that they're going to do something, which is obviously entirely their prerogative. But really, people need to understand what their limits are financially, whether or not they can afford to bet, and what what bet is an appropriate one given their financial means. I enjoy betting. I enjoy from time to time backing a horse at the races. And I'm going to probably have a go this Saturday? You know, yes. Aintree this Saturday. So I'll probably have a look at the form and put a couple of quid on. But I wouldn't do more than a couple of quid.
Yeah, but then people will be watching that and say, well, good for you, but that's because you don't have what some would say the disease of addiction.
Yeah, but are we going to manage the entire society based on the afflictions of a minority. And that's where government's gone. I mean, that is my definition of woke. You know, it's the expanse of policy made to protect and promote ostensibly the interests of a minority, which then begin to affect the majority. And we've got to get away from this. We've got to stop this. People have got to stand up for themselves, think their own positions through, make their own decisions, and be personally responsible.
Tom Watson?
I called for a ban on shirt sponsorship about 5 years ago, and good on the Premier League for doing it. One of the particular issues with this is it wasn't UK gambling firms that were the predominant advertisers. It was gambling firms in other jurisdictions who aren't subject to the regulations that the UK gambling sector have in the UK. And so it wasn't just uncompetitive, it was unfair because they could... they didn't have the responsibilities to their customers that we make UK gambling firms have. In the end, this is about a deal, right? It's a regulated market. It's down to government and regulator to set the framework which gambling companies can operate under to allow people to have a flutter safely. Because what we all want is people to be able to bet on the Grand National or go to... I had 3 days at Cheltenham this year. You could have a flutter, but when things go wrong, the sector takes responsibility for that and helps those people who are in problems with their gambling.
I'm interested to hear from you tonight. Are you somebody that does have a problem with gambling or perhaps has had one, or someone in your family? Because when you have someone with an addiction, it doesn't just affect the person, it affects so many of the other family members. Do you think the government does enough, too much, or what? Your thoughts? gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can reach me. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I've got the most bizarre video I think I've ever seen, quite frankly, and it's all to do with voter ID. Do you support that as a concept or not? See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith.
Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a member of the Reform Party, keeps me company, as does Tom Watson, the former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Now, I know that in that last segment I was talking all about health, healthy eating and healthy drinking. So, indulge my utter hypocrisy now because Dewberry Tavern is open. It is Friday night after all, so I'm going to have a little cheeky cheers and a Prosecco.
Cheers.
Whilst I...
Cheers.
Oh, cheers. Did you see that? That was a passionate cheers from Ben Habib. They nearly fell off his own stool leaning in for a cheers.
I always think you have to clink glasses.
Yes, that's his dedication. Yeah. I like it. He managed to say
I just want to say there's a vodka in this mug, but you've only got 2 glasses on GB News. You've got to give me a vodka glass.
Well, we're not funded by the taxpayer. We can't be so frivolous. We manage our funds carefully and effectively and efficiently. And he is drinking vodka because of the calories.
60 calories.
60 calories, he says, as he drinks a mug of straight vodka. I'm joking.
It's got soda water in it.
It's not straight, that's me teasing. Anyway, look, take a look and a listen to this.
I got something to say about May's local elections. T-Dog's spitting bars about voter ID selection. So make sure you bring it or you'll receive rejection. Rejection. Some may call it suppression, but don't be a square. It's about making sure this election is fair. Your passport, your driving license, you get the gist. Hop online to see the full extensive list.
Now, I'm not a middle-aged man and I don't have teenage children, right? But I can imagine what you've just seen there. And if you didn't see it, trust me, if you're listening, you're not watching, just trust me, right? You've done yourself a favour not seeing that because you won't be able to unsee it. It was a middle-aged man prancing around, doing what I think you call kind of like squat thrusts. Do you call it that? Bouncing up and down. Yeah, squats. Open leg squats on stairs. Ties everywhere. It was all very odd, very cringe-worthy, and I dread to think what his teenage kids would think. Anyway, that was Trevor Holden, Managing Director of Broadland District and South Norfolk Councils. The reason he was rapping was because of voter ID. Of course, you'll be aware that the local elections are coming up in May. And get this, 1 in 4 people don't know that you need ID to vote. Are you one of them? Do you know that you need an ID or not? Tom Watson, do you agree with this whole kind of voter ID premise?
I would agree with having to give identification if there was actually a significant problem with voter fraud, but there's absolutely no evidence for it. So I think it's actually an over-regulated thing. And I've always felt very anxious. I feel guilty that I was involved with the 2005 Proceeds of Crime Act, which means you have to give your ID everywhere. If you want to sell a house, you have to give an estate agent a passport. I apologise to GB News viewers for that, because I voted for that. It seems to me a bit daft that people, we're going to have many thousands of people turn up to vote with their polling card that's been sent to their homes because they've registered to vote and given a signature, and they're not going to be able to vote because they've got to give a passport or a driving licence. Younger people are more used to providing ID now, but I think older people, they're still not used to it, and I think it's going to be a problem at the next election.
Would you? Because if you don't have, I don't know, like say a passport, driving licence or whatever, you can actually apply for one of these things. Let me just give it its correct title. They're called Voter Authority Certificates. That makes it sound a lot more formal than just an ID card. What do you make to it all, Ben?
Well, I mean, you can't move in business without identifying who you are, explaining how you got your money, where your money's going and the channels you're putting it through. The Bribery Act, the FCA, all these regulations constrain business. So it's not surprising, I suppose, that, voter ID is going in this direction. Normally, you'd expect my side of the debate to be against it. Funny enough, I kind of support it because I think it is very important that elections should be fair and that people can't...
Are you saying that I'm a better libertarian than you on this?
Never thought you'd hear that day. Never thought you'd hear that day.
I think there are 2 million people in the country who of voting age who don't have formal ID. So, they are disenfranchised by that, and that is an issue. But the real problem with voter fraud, to the extent there is a problem, isn't with people turning up to the booths. It's with postal votes. Postal votes is where the system is really abused. And we had first-hand experience of that with the Brexit Party. You might recall this, Michelle, in the by-election in Peterborough, where, we felt we were robbed because of the postal vote. And I wouldn't begin to cast aspersions on the Labour Party, but it was the Labour Party that we were looking at. And, there's a whole trade around going round to old people's homes, making sure that they fill the box in where, where you want their vote, false registrations in constituencies in order to sway a particular vote, particularly in marginal constituencies, and so on. And postal votes are completely unaudited. There's no ID there.
You're reading the mind of my viewer, Brenda. You're not that Brenda that said not another one. Was she Brenda? I think she was Brenda from Bristol. Anyway, Brenda says, postal voting is the biggest fiddle going. You two are so aligned in your thinking. When you say that you don't think, Tom, that there's that much evidence of fraud, but how would you know?
Well, I did used to look at this. The Electoral Commission have done lots of reports on this. Whenever there's a by-election, there's always complaints. There's police investigations. We actually throw the book at people in this country if they breach electoral law, particularly if you're a candidate or you're a political party operative and you're caught breaking electoral law. More often than not, you go to jail. And so I mean, if I thought it was actually a problem, or that this would actually somehow enhance our democracy, I would be in favour of bringing ID. But I think what's actually going to happen is they're going to be hundreds of thousands of people are going to be disenfranchised.
One of my viewers agrees with you. He says this is a stupid idea because it will affect turnout. You reckon that you're checked anyway. Well, you're not really checked. You just ticked off a list. But, I mean, any female could say that they're any female. Well, actually, I was just about to say any girl could pick a girl's name and any guy could pick a guy's name. But in this day and age, I mean, goodness gracious me, it could all go on. Anyway, he reckons this will be the lowest turnout ever, I bet. And I do think it would be interesting to see the impact of turnout. If you are in England, you do want to vote, you haven't registered, you've got until, let me check my notes, 25th of April, 5 p.m, in order to register for one of these things. It's free of charge. No excuse. I've never voted for a local election in all my life, I have to be honest. I've got no plans to do so. But if you are, that's how you can get them. Lots of people asking you about your weight loss journey. You've written a book. I'm sure you can Google it. You can get that. Thank you very much for your first appearance. Was it all right, Tom?
It's lovely, yeah.
Good.
But what a great opponent Ben is. Or do I say opponent? I don't know whether I say that.
Sparring partner.
Sparring partner.
Habib, I've got a special request for you, saying, can you do me a favour? Please, can you ask Ben Habib to give my wife one of his winks? Come on, hurry up, look at the time. It's
Where's the camera? Where's the camera?
Where's the camera? Just do it to that one there. Quick.
I can't see it.
Wink.
Not on
that
me.
one. Just wink. They'll get it in. Oh, hang on, try again. That was the most unattractive wink I've ever seen in all my life. Good night, everyone. See you Monday.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your weather update. Now for the weekend, it's turning drier and warmer for most, although we will see some rain in the northwest on Sunday. And for the time being, low pressure still in charge through Friday evening and overnight. This weather front here sliding down towards the low countries, but some wet weather to come into the first part of Saturday morning across the far southeast. Elsewhere, you can see this ridge moving in from the west, and what that means, quieter conditions through Saturday. This rain here through Saturday